I've been talking about the Imaginal for a couple of years now, and some of my most common feedback every step of the way has been, what the hell are you talking about? What is this? What do you mean? And all of that stuff. And finally, a couple of years later, it does seem like I've kind of honed in on a working definition that is pretty understandable for people who just don't have any idea, have never heard the word before. And obviously enough, it comes down to pretty much what you would expect from the dictionary definitions, where there's two overlapping definitions. And once we kind of overlap them, look through both of them at the same time, it starts to become pretty obvious and pretty intuitive what imaginal practice actually entails. The first definition, you can pretty much tell from just how the word looks, how the word sounds. Imagine, imagination, imaginal. It is related to imagination pretty closely, shares a root word with it. And yeah, in a very general sense, is about imagination. It involves imagination, though it involves an extremely different definition and frame on imagination than the one that we usually kind of grow up with or accept in our culture. And we'll get back to that in a minute. So first bit is imagination, but not imagination. And the second bit comes from the study of insects, entomology. And the imaginal form of a bug is just its final form. It is the fully matured adult form of an insect, is its imago. And the adjective for that is imaginal. So for example, the caterpillar, its imaginal form is the butterfly. The dragonfly is the imago of all the previous things that it has been in its life. Dragonflies spend most of their life underwater. They really only become full final adults at the last few months there. And that is the imaginal form, the dragonfly, the adult, matured aspect of these creatures. The final point of their life cycle, where they're finally fully formed. That is their imaginal form. That is the imago. So if we take both of these definitions, loosely imagination type stuff, loosely adulthood, fully, I like the word evolved for this actually, the most fully evolved version of what is in your soul to be. And we kind of place those over each other. Yeah, we can just see that imaginal practice is more or less the art of unfolding your most fully evolved self, your most fully evolved, not even on an individual level, so not even your really, but unfolding the evolutionary potential of the human through practices that evolve imagination. So those are the two basic definitions. Each one kind of needs a bit more greebling to clarify what we do and don't mean there. So I said that imaginal involves imagination, but with a very different frame on what imagination is and what it's for. The way we usually think of imagination is as something essentially childish, right? And degenerative. So when children go out and just make a fantasy world for themselves in the backyard, we say they're very imaginative. They're exercising their imaginations, all of that. We tend to think of imagination as something that you do. You create this inner image, you create this inner world, you create these impressions and senses of something that is unreal, but treating it as if it is real. And there's a few ways to do that. So let's just go with the two sentences, like imagine a unicorn. That's one thing, right? I'm getting a mental picture. That's a unicorn. Cool. I'm creating that mental image. That's imagination. Then something a little deeper in that we don't often think of is closer to imagine you are a tiger. This might take a little more effort. You have to kind of close your eyes, feel down into your body. What would it feel like to move like a tiger, to see your environment like a tiger, to feel that hunger and that need to hunt, and also just the need to sleep. They are sleepy big cats. But all of that, you have to go beyond just a picture in your mind, which is kind of the standard imagine this thing, and go down into imagine something else to be true about you. Imagine something else to be the case about not just your mind, but your body, your senses, all of this stuff, this very full, this whole being approach to imagining something to be the case. That is getting closer into the imaginal. And then if we want to move a little deeper, we get to something like just noticing. So not actively generating, not dropping into something and trying to create a sense, but simply noticing what's already there, the unconscious assumptions that we always imagine to be the case. So if you know someone who is, you think they're very naive, you might say that they imagine the world is just full of people who love them and want to help them, and they don't imagine that anything bad could happen to them. That's a slightly different definition of imagination, right? They're not waking up each morning and visualizing a world where no one will hurt me, where everything just works out in my favor. No, it's something implicit beneath the conscious level that they would probably deny if you placed it directly to them, but that there is some truth to that. There's some layer of their experience, something, some way that they take in all of the information about the world, and it all kind of falls into this preset pattern, this archetypal layer of experience, where all the information just settles into this picture of the world as essentially a nice place where good things are going to happen to them and their efforts are going to go well. And anything that doesn't fit that kind of gets shoved aside or reformed so that they can jam it into the puzzle to fit nicely. And then opposite the same. We all know some people who, no matter how well things are going for them, no matter what nice things are going on, the world is just a terrible place where nothing good can happen. And everything good that does happen is just evidence that something much worse is right around the corner, right? Same thing. They don't just wake up and imagine actively, the world is horrible. I'll keep that in mind and hold that imagination forever. No, it's completely implicit, unconscious level of experience that you have to notice is there. You don't really create it, or at least the conscious ego, the me, the you that are talking and speaking here. We don't create it. Something else much deeper just formed something about us into that shape, and everything else falls into that shape. And it's not just about the type of world we live in. There's a lot of, we'll call them stories, these shapes and patterns that everything just falls unconsciously into. There's a lot of these stories about who I am, what kind of person I am, what kind of life I've been given to lead, what my place in, my social circles is, what my place in this world is, what this planet's place in the world is. It's a very different embodied experience and just direct experience of what is going on. Even two people having the exact same direct input to them. If one of them believes that they are in a world that was divinely created a couple thousand years ago, and God is watching over them and shining love on them and all this other stuff, and that there's people out there who are like actively hate them and are trying to come and kill them, that's a very particular type of world to live in. Even if all you are doing is standing in line at the coffee shop, years and years of holding this type of belief, of everything falling into this pattern of this is what the universe is, it creates a very different experience than someone who lives in a universe where everything is just random accidents. We live on a rock hurtling meaninglessly through space. And all of us just happened because some cells kind of mixed around and it accidentally created this whole bioelectric consciousness thing that will disappear into the darkness of the cosmos if you just give it time, and none of it actually matters. Both of those. If both of those people are just standing in line, waiting to get coffee, nothing else going on, those are still insanely different direct experiences of what is going on, what your mission in life is, what your purpose is, what the world is, and how to treat the people around you. And this includes, 10,000 other visions of the world and visions of the self and people. that all just kind of take unconscious form. These things, yeah, kind of take shape well before we become consciously online. And they just kind of get reshaped and molded and added to, but they don't tend to change that much without conscious effort. So that's kind of expanding what we mean by imagination. It's not just holding a particular idea in our head, particular image. It's not just creating a particular sense of, I am this is the world I'm living. I'm going to like hold that image of the world and move through it as if it's like that. It's all of that like embodied implicit stuff, but it's unconscious. It's deeper layer of what do you think the world is beneath what you think the world is. Who do you think you are beneath who you think you are? And of course, recursively, beneath who you think you are is who you think you are, on and on, forever. So these deeper layers of experience, you don't just look internally and go, oh, I probably think this. It doesn't really work that way. It's whatever you think and whatever you come up with from that will just be an output of those deeper layers expressing themselves on the higher level layers. You have to learn to kind of very subtly perceive and watch the shapes of what is moving in your psyche. And once you've gotten, this takes a lot of practice, but once you've gotten pretty good at noticing those shapes, noticing the dynamics and movements that are happening there, you can start to shift them a little more and redirect and reshape things. And the more layers down that you get really sensitive to, that you get really adept with, the more deeply you can reshape and initiate change. You can change how your life energy flows, is one way of expressing this. Another one is just you can change what is directly obvious to you. Because that's really what those deeper layers feel like day to day, right? It's just what is obvious about yourself and about the world around you. And based on what is obvious, you realize what the obvious choices to make are. You move through your day treating people a particular way, going about your work a particular way, because those are the obvious things to do based on the patterns of the world that you implicitly hold. So if you can move those, if you can shift those, you can change what seems directly obvious to you. And that is huge. That is everything. The main difference between any two given lives is what seems obvious to the people living those lives and how they act on what is obvious to them. So that's for the imagination side of things. That's how we would define that. That's a little more fleshed out version of what goes on over there. As for the imago side, the insect imaginal side, less to say there, but one thing I do want to point out is, again, coming back to this, how do I want to state that? Coming back to this like conscious explicit versus unconscious implicit type of practice. One of the first fantasies that we come up with when we hear like, oh, this practice is about unfolding, my highest self, my evolutionary potential, the human potential that is in me to be the best I can be. And then my ego goes, oh, this right here is the best that I could be. This is the best that I could possibly imagine being. So I'm going to like direct everything at that and start just zooming for that. And this is actually how like, we don't tend to think of it or call it imaginal practice, but this is how a ton of self-help stuff works, is they tap into one or two layers down of just what are your unconscious assumptions about yourself and the world. You get one layer down, maybe you get two layers down, and then from there, from that level of awareness, you like put up this thing, this North Star to move towards. I'm going to be an effective and productive employee and a loving father and all these good things that you want to be. But you think that you can decide what the imago is. You think that you can decide what you are moving towards. What is the fullest expression of your potential? And there's a lot of problems with this. One of them is just, there's a lot of quotes to this effect, but something along the lines of, the level of mind where the problem is not the level of mind that can find the solution, right? Something has to change. So if you're just using the same everyday top level ego me to decide what the best version of me is, it's not going to be satisfying. It's not going to sink into those deeper levels. And it's not going to give that really deep sense of alignment that you get when a lot of these deeper layers start to move and shift and actually direct what you feel to be really authentic energy that is just obviously pouring through your life and wants to be directed a certain way. Instead, you'll pretty much just feel like the same conscious ego, but a little more productive, maybe a bit more extra happiness sprinkled on top. Nice. It's good. But it's not transformation. It's just change. You've just changed a little bit of what's already the case. There's no real evolution, transformation, movement towards imago going on there. It's just, yeah, it's not the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. It's just the caterpillar buying a really nice set of clothes to feel fancy, which is nice. Who doesn't want some fancy clothes? Cool. When we are talking about the imago, when we are talking about imaginal practice and imaginally moving towards unfolding this higher potential, this higher self, there's a lot of terms that people use. Ugh, I don't want to get into that. Maybe I should. Another time, we'll get into that. A lot of people use different terms for what like the highest version of a human potential is. And we've got things like the sage, the Buddha, the Christ consciousness, hundreds of these, all of them out there. And I'm not going to get too into those, but just kind of reflect on if you can find 10 to 12 different versions of those, of different traditions and philosophies' version of what is the highest human potential to move towards. And then just notice in yourself, do some of these not sit very well? You say them and you say like, I will become, for example, a Buddha. I am directing myself towards Buddhahood. How does that feel in your heart, in your gut, in the space around you? What actually happens? What is the imaginal sense? What is the pattern going on that you notice there? Versus, any of the other dozen ones where I will become this. I am moving towards that. Some of them are going to sit quite nicely with you. Some of them really, really are not. And there's information there about which ones are settling in, which ones are not. And over time, as things change, noticing that too changes. Ones that sounded very, very appealing to you at the beginning, they kind of fall away. Ones that felt distant and maybe a little ick, those ones you start to get a sense of, oh, there's something there for me. But yeah, that's a tangent. I may talk about that another time. We'll leave that out for today. So yeah, when we're talking about imago, about the imaginal form, about unfolding one's full potential, just one's full humanity, essentially. What we're really talking about here is wholeness. Not some like transcendental Ubermensch state. There's another one, Ubermensch. But much more about just wholeness. If you flesh out everything that is in you to be fleshed out, what's there? What happens at that point? That's the imago. And how does the imago want to move? But yeah. So if it's not this explicit thing that we are choosing, or that we even really can choose if we try, if there's not, the imago isn't some North Star that we put ahead of us as I'm becoming that, then what is it? And again, we come back to this implicit thing. You can't really choose it. You can just notice what is already happening, start directing and rearranging things into what you will feel is a deeper sense of alignment. You'll just notice, this doesn't fit with me. This doesn't fit with me. This feels right. This is where I need to be. And as you get down to deeper and deeper layers, you'll kind of have to rearrange the ones above it because, yeah, you have a deeper sense of, okay, that actually needs to be directed a bit more this way. But in general, you're just kind of moving down layer by layer and dealing with the layers one by one, not choosing what is the end state that I'm aiming towards. And I'll direct myself at that, but instead looking at where you are, what is happening in you directly, and dealing with that, letting it unfold, noticing what's happening, shifting, directing, learning. Yeah, just kind of this art of redirecting and reshaping what's there into what it wants to be. Not just what your ego thinks it should be more shaped like this. What actually wants to unfold there. And here we're getting into stuff that's probably sounding more abstract unless you're fairly deep into imaginal practice. So we'll kind of cut off there with with the introduction to what is the imaginal. And just one brief note, just another brief metaphorical note on how this works and how we go about attending to and noticing these deeper layers. There's a phrase from a fake artist in the movie Stay I watched years ago that has really stuck with me. He says, if we cannot see the wind, we can at least see the wind's will. And that feels important to me about the unconscious. We cannot directly observe these deeper level patterns and dynamics that are shaping our view of who we are, what the world is. What we can do is watch how things move there. And that can start to tell us a lot about what those dynamics are. And this is where we get practices like Jungian active imagination, where you kind of revisit a image that feels important to you or a figure from a dream. You drop into a light meditation, call it back up, let it sit there, sit with it, and give it space to unfold, to express itself. And you watch what it does. You just notice. Does it start, very broad examples, do these fantasies always kind of seem to tend their way towards bitterness and revenge? Okay, that's telling you about something that's in the layer you're working with that needs to be brought up and dealt with. Do they always tend towards these huge, bright fantasies of if everything were different, if everything changed, I would finally be happy? Again, that tells you something about how the patterns are moving, what dynamics are play in the layer of consciousness that you're currently dropping into. Yeah, if we cannot see the wind, we can at least see the wind's will. If we cannot see the unconscious itself, we can at least drop things into the unconscious, or even just look at what's already swirling there and just see, how are they moving? What's shifting there? And as they start to, even just paying attention to them, they start to rearrange themselves a bit more. Just putting your awareness in them starts to crystallize and reshape some of that unconscious energy, some of what's down there for you. And things start to move fairly rapidly once you get an intuitive feel for how to move with these, how to lean into them, how to back off and let them move on their own. It all just kind of starts to take the reins on its own. Yeah, I'll just leave it there for today. We're already into ranting territory. Yeah, what is imaginal practice? It's the overlap of those two things. It's just this deep imagination, this deep imaginative faculty of noticing how we imagine the world to be, and this aiming towards adulthood, this orienting ourselves towards the imago, towards a willingness to change and transform, towards a willingness to let that process take over. And just as that last encouraging note, continuing that metaphor, when a caterpillar goes into the cocoon, it dissolves into goo, and that goo feeds what will become the butterfly. It is not always obvious how something is a movement forward, how something is part of an unfolding, or even like a very positive transformation. They can look, on the one hand, they can look painful, and you feel like that would almost be nice sometimes, because then it feels like you're fighting through and there's a purpose here. But sometimes it just looks like dissolving into goop, and you're not sure what purpose this could possibly serve. In those cases, my watch phrase is always, the only sin is to exit the dynamic. Always just stay in the dynamic that is present. Even when it seems like things are dissolving, things are falling apart. There's that line I really like. The process of transformation consists almost entirely of decay. Even in those times when everything seems to be consisting entirely of decay, stay with the dynamic. Keep dropping in. Keep noticing what shapes are taking place, what dynamics are at play, and just let them move. Let them move and lean into them when necessary. All right. Yeah, that'll be it for today.